Aaron moved quietly through the dark, damp tunnels of the city sewers. The smell of damp concrete and stagnant water filled his nostrils, but he had long grown used to it. Above him, the city hummed with life, cars, voices, and lights. But down here, in the forgotten underworld, he had found a strange kind of freedom. The sewers were messy, yes, and the rats were everywhere, but it was safer than the streets where people looked at him with suspicion or fear. He was small for his age, wiry from years of scrounging and surviving alone, and his dark eyes were always alert, scanning for danger and opportunity. That evening, Aaron was searching for food scraps near a narrow side tunnel when he heard a soft, uneven shuffle echoing through the damp walls. He froze, his heart thumped in his chest. He had heard rats, of course, and sometimes even stray animals wandered into the tunnels. But this sound was different. Hesitant, he stepped closer, trying to see into the darkness. That's when he noticed her. She was small, barely taller than a child of 10, limping as she tried to move along the slippery walls. Her skin shimmered faintly, a soft silver with hints of blue and green as though the dim light of the sewer reflected differently off her body. Her large, almond-shaped eyes were wide with fear, glimmering in the faint light. Her clothing, if it could be called that, was torn and worn, hanging loosely around her fragile frame. She looked entirely out of place in the human world. Aaron's first instinct was to run. After all, he had seen many strange things in his life, but nothing like this. Yet, even as he hesitated, something inside him shifted. This small creature, this alien girl, was clearly hurt. She limped with her left leg dragging slightly, and there were scratches on her arms as though she had struggled to survive. He couldn't just leave her there. Swallowing his fear, Aaron stepped forward cautiously. "Hey," he whispered softly, keeping his voice low. Do you need help?" The girl froze and turned her glowing eyes toward him. She tilted her head slightly, as though unsure whether he was friend or threat. Her gaze held a mix of fear, pain, and something Aaron couldn't quite understand, a fragile hope. I won't hurt you," he said quickly, holding his hands up.
"I can help your leg."
"I have some cloth." The girl didn't speak. She only blinked slowly and, after a tense moment, allowed him to approach. Aaron carefully knelt beside her, inspecting the injured limb. Her leg was bruised and scraped, and she winced as he touched it. Using strips of cloth he had torn from an old shirt, he fashioned a makeshift bandage. He worked slowly, murmuring calming words, and after a few tense minutes he finished. "There," he said, stepping back. "That should help. You'll need to rest." She remained silent for a long moment, then, in a voice soft and musical, she spoke a single word. "Thala." Aaron tilted his head. "Thala, is that your name?" She nodded slightly, her eyes never leaving his face. It was clear she didn't fully understand his language, but her trust was beginning to grow. For the rest of the night, Aaron shared what little food he had, some stale bread and a small container of water with her. She watched him quietly, nibbling at the bread, occasionally reaching out to touch his hand with delicate, trembling fingers. By dawn, Thala was still too weak to walk properly. Aaron knew he could not leave her there alone. He decided he would venture into the city to gather more supplies, things that could help her recover. He had scavenged for years and knew where to find what he needed without drawing attention to himself. Stepping out of the sewer onto the streets was always jarring. The sunlight was harsh after days underground, and the sounds of the city were overwhelming. Aaron clutched the small bag of supplies against his chest and made his way to the first target, a street market where leftovers were often discarded. He moved with care, avoiding the guards and shopkeepers, his small frame slipping unnoticed through narrow alleyways. Hours passed as he collected scraps of food, water, and some soft cloth to improve Thala's bandages. As he returned to the sewer, he was more aware than ever that something about this alien girl was extraordinary. The faint shimmer of her skin, the strange glow in her eyes, it hinted at abilities he didn't understand, powers that were not of this world. When he arrived back, Thala was sitting up, leaning against the wall of the sewer. Her eyes glimmered brighter than before, and she watched him with a strange intensity. "You returned?" she asked in the same soft, melodic tone. "Yes," Aaron said, smiling faintly. "I brought more food, water, and cloth. You need to get better." Thala stretched her bandaged leg, and then, without warning, she lifted her hand slightly. A small rock from the floor hovered in the air, circling slowly above her head. Aaron's eyes widened in shock. You can do that?" he asked. She nodded, a hint of pride in her expression, though there was still fear. Safe. Here, she whispered. Aaron realized that she had abilities far beyond his understanding. Yet in that moment she was completely dependent on him. That knowledge didn't scare him. It made him feel more protective. Over the next few days, Aaron helped Thala as she regained strength. He showed her how to gather food, how to avoid dangers in the sewer, and even simple human routines like washing her face in the water pools. Thala in return showed him glimpses of her abilities, levitating small objects, creating bursts of light when she was excited or frightened, and moving with surprising speed despite her limp. Aaron began to notice something else too. Thala was learning from him. She was curious about everything, his words, his movements, even the way he smiled or frowned. And he in turn was learning about her. Even though she could not fully communicate in human language, he could see her thoughts and emotions in the subtle glow of her eyes, in her gestures, and in the expressions on her face. One evening, as they sat near a small pool of water reflecting the dim lights of the sewer, Thala suddenly spoke in a string of words that Aaron didn't understand. The words flowed like music, and as she spoke, the water around them began to ripple and lift slightly as though responding to her voice. Aaron's jaw dropped. "Can you do that every time?" he asked, astonished. Thala nodded shyly. "Yes, but careful." Aaron realized that she was not only powerful but also cautious. She had survived alone for some time, and those abilities were her only protection. Yet, despite her fear, she had allowed him into her world, and for the first time in his life, Aaron felt like he belonged somewhere, like he had a purpose beyond mere survival. Days turned into a week, and their bond strengthened. Aaron taught Thala simple human games and shared stories about the city above. Thala, in return, tried to teach him her own strange gestures and sounds, though he struggled to understand. Still, the companionship was enough. They laughed together, learned together, and slowly, the walls of fear and mistrust around both their hearts began to crumble. One afternoon, while gathering food for Thala, Aaron noticed a group of humans on the streets above pointing and whispering. Something about the way they looked around, tense and fearful, made him uneasy. He hurried back to the sewer, heart pounding, and found Thala sitting calmly. But as he approached, he saw that the small objects she had been levitating were now circling faster, forming a protective shield around her. Are they coming?" he asked, fear rising in his voice. Thala nodded, her eyes glowing brighter, her hands steady. Aaron realized that whatever the danger, she had the power to defend herself now, and perhaps him too. He felt a surge of pride. He had helped her when she was weak, and now she could help them both survive. That night, as they sat together in the quiet of the sewer, Aaron looked at Thala and felt a deep sense of hope he had never experienced before. In a world that had ignored him, that had treated him like nothing, he had found something extraordinary, a friend, a companion, and perhaps the first step toward a life full of possibilities. And though neither of them knew exactly what the next day would bring, they both understood one thing clearly. Their lives were no longer separate. The boy who had survived in the sewers and the alien girl who had survived alone had found each other, and together they could face whatever the world above or below might throw at them. The morning sunlight broke through the sewer grates, casting faint golden lines across the damp walls. Aaron and Thala had just woken, and the world above seemed calm at first. But the calm was deceptive. Aaron noticed movement near the grate. A group of people in dark uniforms were peering down, their faces tense, hands ready on strange devices that hummed softly. Aaron's heart raced. He had never seen these humans before. They were not city guards or traders he knew. They seemed organized, like they had come specifically looking for something. Or someone. He looked at Thala, who was sitting quietly, her large eyes glowing faintly. They are coming for you," he whispered, fear creeping into his voice. Thala's eyes flickered and she lifted her hand slightly. Small rocks, bits of trash, and scraps of metal around them began to rise and float in a circular pattern above her head. They twirled slowly, forming a protective barrier. Aaron realized that despite her small size and fragile appearance, she was more powerful than anything he had imagined. I can help," he said quickly, "but you have to trust me." She nodded slightly, and without another word, they moved deeper into the tunnels, weaving through the twists and turns of the sewer system. Aaron led the way, careful to avoid dead ends and areas that could collapse. The hum of the machines above followed them like a shadow, growing louder as the humans searched, but Thala's shield kept them safe for now. Hours passed. Aaron realized that the pursuers were persistent. They knew exactly where to look, and they moved quickly. But the boy also knew the sewer better than anyone. He could slip through hidden doors, duck into narrow spaces, and use abandoned pipes to move silently. Thala followed, her steps light, her eyes glowing softly as she continued to lift and move small objects to create obstacles for the humans. Eventually, they emerged into an old abandoned section of the city, far from the streets where people lived. Crumbling buildings and broken roads surrounded them. Here Thala could rest and Aaron could plan their next move. She sat on a pile of rubble, watching him intently. "Safe? Here?" she asked, her melodic voice trembling slightly. "For now," Aaron said, kneeling beside her. "But we need a plan. They won't stop looking for you. We need to find somewhere safe, somewhere they can't reach easily." Thala nodded slowly, then looked around the ruined buildings. Her eyes began to glow brighter, and she extended her hands. The rubble lifted gently, forming a small protective dome around them. Aaron watched in awe. He had never seen anything like it. The dome was not just a shield, it seemed alive, responsive, a reflection of Thala's thoughts and feelings. "You're amazing," he whispered. She tilted her head and gave a small, shy smile. It was the first time she had smiled so openly, and for a moment Aaron felt a warmth he had never known in his lonely life. They were alone in the ruins, surrounded by danger, and yet he felt safe beside her. As night fell, Aaron and Thala huddled together in the protective dome. The city above continued its restless hum, but down here in this forgotten place they had a moment of peace. Thala spoke more words now, forming simple sentences in a mix of her language and broken human words. Aaron listened carefully, learning what he could. She told him about her home, a distant world filled with light and colors he could barely imagine, and about her journey, how she had been separated from her people and injured while trying to survive. Aaron shared his own story too, about growing up alone in the city, about the sewers that had become his home, and about the kindness he had longed to find in others. Thala listened, her glowing eyes softening with empathy. In that quiet, ruined space, the bond between them grew stronger than either could have expected. The next day brought new challenges. Word had spread quickly in the city above. People whispered about strange lights, objects moving on their own, and the small glowing figure that had been seen near the sewers. Authorities and curious onlookers alike searched the streets, but Aaron had learned to stay hidden, and Thala's abilities made them nearly untouchable. Still, Aaron knew they could not stay in the ruins forever. They needed a safer place, somewhere outside the city, where they could rest and learn about each other without constant fear. He remembered stories of an old underground station on the outskirts, long abandoned, where few humans ever ventured. It would be dangerous to reach, but it was their best chance. The journey was slow and tense. Every sound, every shadow made Aaron's heart pound. Thala remained close, her eyes glowing, levitating small stones and debris to create barriers and distractions. The human boy marveled at how effortlessly she used her power now. She was still learning, but even her small movements caused objects to move as if obeying her will. When they finally reached the abandoned station, it was dark, dusty, and silent. Broken lights hung from the ceiling and old signs peeled from the walls. But to Aaron and Thala it was perfect. Here no one would find them easily. Here they could begin to plan for a future that didn't end in fear. Thala explored cautiously, moving slowly through the empty platforms. She lifted debris, rearranging it with care, creating a small space for them to rest. Aaron set down the supplies he had brought and helped her settle. She examined everything with curious eyes, occasionally lifting objects to test her strength. "Stronger," she said softly, and Aaron realized that she meant not just her body, but herself, her confidence, her ability to survive. Over the next few days, they adapted to their new home. Aaron taught Thala more about human life, how to scavenge safely, how to observe without being seen, and even some basic human tools she could use. Thala, in return, taught him about her abilities, how she could control objects with her mind, create small bursts of energy, and even influence the light around her. Aaron was fascinated and humbled. She was small yet powerful beyond anything he had ever imagined. One afternoon, as Aaron rested, Thala spoke in a mix of her language and human words. She asked him to follow her to a small chamber in the station. There, the walls glowed faintly with an alien energy he didn't understand. Thala's hands hovered over a broken console, and with a few movements she activated it. Lights flickered on, revealing maps, star charts, and images of her home planet. Aaron stared, amazed. He realized that Thala was not just a stranded alien child. She carried knowledge and technology far beyond anything humans had seen. And yet she had chosen to trust him. He felt a surge of pride and responsibility. This small alien girl, alone and frightened, had chosen him as her companion. As night fell again, Aaron and Thala sat together, planning for the days ahead. Thala was now strong enough to walk without limping, and her powers were more controlled. Aaron realized that their lives had changed forever. The city above no longer mattered. They had found safety, friendship, and hope in each other. Suddenly, a faint sound echoed through the station. Footsteps, careful and quiet. Aaron tensed, but Thala placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes glowing. Objects in the room lifted gently, forming a protective barrier. The footsteps paused, then retreated. Aaron breathed a sigh of relief. He realized that no matter the danger, they could face it together. By the end of the week, the abandoned station had become a small home. Aaron and Thala learned from each other, trained together, and explored the hidden corners of the old station. They discovered a small underground stream, where they could fish for food. They found abandoned storage rooms filled with useful supplies. And most importantly, they built trust, a bond that went beyond species, beyond fear, beyond the harshness of the world above. Aaron began to see himself differently. For years he had thought he was weak, forgotten, and unimportant. But with Thala he realized that courage was not about size or strength. It was about heart, kindness, and the willingness to stand by someone in need. He had saved her life, yes, but she had saved his too, in a way he was only beginning to understand. Thala, for her part, began to trust humans in a way she had never done before. She had been abandoned, hurt, and alone, yet this boy, so small, so ordinary by human standards, had given her shelter, food, and protection. He had believed in her when no one else did, and she was determined to repay that trust in any way she could. One evening, as they sat together near the stream, Thala looked at Aaron and spoke a sentence fully in human words. "You, my friend." Aaron smiled, feeling warmth spread through him. "And you're my friend too," he said. For the first time in their lives, both of them felt safe, understood, and connected. They had survived the dangers of the city above, the fear of strangers, and the loneliness of their separate worlds. Together, they had built something new. A friendship that crossed worlds, species, and imagination itself. And though they did not yet know what the future held, whether humans above would continue to search, whether more dangers would come, they knew one thing for certain: they would face it together. In a world that often overlooked the small and the weak, the boy from the sewers and the limping alien girl had found strength in each other, proving that kindness, courage, and trust could create miracles even in the darkest places. In the quiet of the abandoned station, with stars faintly visible through broken vents above, Aaron and Thala sat side by side. The alien girl, once lost and injured, now stood tall, confident, and glowing softly. The boy, once lonely and forgotten, now had purpose, hope, and a friend beyond imagination. And for the first time,